Jeff Bezos sells $5 billion worth of Amazon shares, and are scraps being used on Boeing planes? That's coming up today on Business Matters. Good afternoon, and I appreciate you being here with me today. I'm your host, Don Ma. Of course, happy 4th of July, everybody. Markets are closed today. So our first story, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos cashing in here. He's selling $5 billion worth of Amazon stock as shares hit an all-time high. Amazon stock is up more than 30% so far this year. So after the sale, Bezos will still own about $180 billion worth of Amazon shares, or that's about close to 9% of the outstanding stock. Bezos, by the way, is the world's second richest person with a net worth of over $214 billion. This is according to a tally by Forbes. Amazon had a stellar performance in the first quarter. Net sales rose by 13%. And let's also talk a little bit about Tesla. Short sellers of the company have taken a $3.5 billion hit. So Tesla shares beat delivery expectations, the company did, and this week its shares have rallied about 17% since it beat those expectations. This is actually bad news for the short sellers who are betting on the stock to drop. Currently, 3.5% of outstanding Tesla stock is being shorted, so that's worth about $22 billion in total. Short selling is actually rather a risky way to trade because theoretically speaking, there's no limit to how much you could lose if the price keeps going up. And General Motors getting hit with a $146 million fine, and that's connected to excessive CO2 emissions. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says its older cars don't comply with emission standards, and the agency says around 6 million older vehicles emit over 10% more carbon dioxide than claimed. EPA also says that GM's vehicles consume 10% more fuel than the company claims. Of course, GM denies any wrongdoing here. The affected vehicles are free to remain on the road, and owners don't have to take any action. Okay, on to Walmart. It is facing a class action lawsuit for alleged deceptive and unfair pricing. So what's going on here is that an Illinois resident says Walmart knowingly prices items on the shelf lower than what you end up paying at the register. He says that while the price difference is small, they do add up to hundreds of millions of dollars of additional revenue for Walmart every single year. So last year, a district court dismissed the case, saying that since Walmart provides its customers with a receipt to compare the scan price with the shelf price, there's no possibility for deception. But yesterday, a court of appeals reversed this decision. It says receipts aren't enough since they only are given after a customer makes a purchase. And the court also added trying to figure out if the shelf price is the actual price requires unnecessary effort. And the case is remanded for future proceedings. All right, two of the most popular high-end department stores joining forces here. The parent company of luxury retailer Saks Fifth Avenue have agreed to buy Neiman Marcus. The deal is expected to be worth more than $2.5 billion. The merger comes years after Neiman Marcus filed for bankruptcy during the pandemic. The new group will be known as Saks Global. And company leaders say going forward, Saks Global will invest in technology, includes of course, artificial intelligence, as well as both legacy and emerging brands. Okay, China is far ahead of other countries, it seems like, in generative AI patents. This is according to United Nations data. Now, compared to the US, China filed 5 times more patents. More than 38,000 generative AI inventions were filed by China between 2014 and 2023. The Chinese patent applications covered a broad area of sectors. That's from autonomous driving to publishing to document management. China's Tencent filed the most patents in that period, over 2,000 of them. And China's Baidu, e-commerce giant Alibaba, TikTok parent ByteDance are also among the top applicants. And American companies here as well, like IBM, Google parent Alphabet, and Microsoft also each filed hundreds of patents. And moving on, as I mentioned at the beginning, an incident with a Boeing plane earlier this year where a door plug detached midair has led to congressional investigations of Boeing and its leadership. It's also led to allegations from whistleblowers about the company's safety issues. Here's the latest, with a whistleblower alleging that Boeing knowingly used defective parts in its planes. Take a listen.
If Everett, Washington is a Boeing company town, then Merle Myers was a company man. A 30-year veteran of Boeing, Myers says his job as a quality control manager put his kids through college. It's a family tradition. His late mother was a Boeing inspector, able to unilaterally decide if a new airplane just off the factory line was fit to fly.
What would she think about what is happening at Boeing?
She'd be absolutely livid.
Myers' new allegations detail an elaborate, off-the-books practice centering on parts deemed not safe to put in new airplanes. He is the latest whistleblower to come forward with claims of quality control lapses at Boeing. This is his first TV interview, inspired by the January 5th door plug blowout on an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9. Spray-painted red, bad parts deemed not up to Boeing standards are taken from Boeing's Everett plant and sent to its scrap facility in Auburn. But then one day in 2015, Myers says a crate of bad parts were improperly sent back from Auburn to Boeing's Everett factory. Myers alleges the practice continued for years, tallying that more than 50,000 parts escaped Boeing quality control.
50,000 parts?
That's what we counted at the time.
It seems like a heck of a lot.
It's a heck of a lot indeed.
What does that say to you?
Well, that says it puts people's lives at risk, not just passengers, but flight crews. And a lot of these are flight critical parts that made it back into the production system.
Company emails show Myers repeatedly flagged the issue to Boeing's corporate investigations team, pointing out what he says were repeat violations of Boeing safety rules. But Myers insists investigators routinely failed to enforce those rules. In a 2022 email, he wrote that Boeing investigators ignored eyewitness observations and the hard work done to ensure the safety of future passengers and crew.
Why would they do this?
Schedule. It's schedule.
To get planes out the door. To make money.
Yeah.
Myers believes he was forced out of Boeing last year and is concerned there are still problems at the company.
Well, I think they need to punish, they need to fire people that blatantly violate the process and endanger the flying public. It's a huge problem. And a core requirement of a quality system is to keep bad parts and good parts apart.
In a statement, Boeing says it encourages employees to speak up and that to ensure the safety, quality, and conformance of our products, we investigate all allegations of improper behavior, such as unauthorized movement of parts or mishandling of documents. We then work diligently to address them and make improvements. Myers says he is coming forward now because of the pride he has in Boeing. He goes so far as to call it a wonderful company. One, he says, has been going astray and is in desperate need of change.
But you have to care. Leadership has to care to do that. But if you can't even keep parts segregated from good parts, what else aren't you doing right?
And let me make a quick mention about romance scams before we head to break, because we have new data on that. Better watch out, because the FTC says Americans lost over $1 billion to the scams last year. So in case you don't know, a romance scam is when someone builds a fake relationship with you online in order to trick you into sending them money or personal information. So 40% of those affected said contact with the scammer started on social media. And in all, victims lost a median of $2,000 last year, which is the highest of any form of imposter scam. And almost 3/4 of victims are men, according to a Javelin report from 2022. All right, heading on to break here. When we come back, Europe slaps big tariffs on electric vehicles made in China, and China is threatening retaliation. And we also hear from an award-winning barbecue master on July 4th cookouts. That and more right here on Business Matters. Don't go away. And welcome back. I just have a few more important stories for you today. Economists are forecasting a slowdown in the Chinese economy in the coming months and years. So what could be causing a slowdown? What are the factors here in the world's second largest economy? I talked to an expert on China at the American Institute for Economic Research, Ryan Yong. Ryan, thank you very much for joining me here today. So I want to talk to you about China's economy. Tell us, big picture-wise, what are some of the risks that's afflicting the economy right now?
So there's a couple of major risks, I think, in the Chinese economy that really give us some indication that there's some instability and some uncertainty about it going forward. One of those major risks is in the property sector. Been a lot of ink spilled on that, a lot of discussion around it, but that's been a far larger problem than just any single company. It's been pretty endemic across the economy overall. And a second major risk point is the larger financial system.
All right, so a couple of things here. China's property sector, financial risk within the system. What does all this lead to?
Well, so it leads to an economy that is unsettled and is really trying to be managed centrally. And this has always been sort of the hardest point, the weakest point for the Chinese economy, is that when something looks like it's not performing the way the central party wants, they then often try to intervene through regulatory means or through purchasing or through mandates. And as a result, perpetuate the role of the state within the economy, where decisions are not being made by market forces, but are instead being made by officials within the Communist Party or others want it to look like, rather than what consumer supply and demand might otherwise push.
So you talk about there being impact on the economy, but does the CCP even, why does it care about how the economy is doing, right? Isn't it priority of concern is that its own power isn't impacted?
Yeah, well, so that's exactly why they care. In fact, one of the major things that I and others have looked at is that the perpetuation of that power has often been through the ability to deliver consistent economic improvements for China. And as China's income and overall wealth have increased across the population, it's become increasingly difficult to deliver high returns. And as a result, the CCP is concerned that one of the major sort of stakes of their power, which is that consistent delivering of economic growth, is no longer as easy, in part because of how they've intervened into the economy. But now they have to try to figure out some other way to maintain power and authority. And a big part of that is why they intervene into the economic sector, to try to prevent economic downturns and problems. Okay,
this may be a simplistic question, but you tell me here. Can't the CCP just make the economy look good and then through that, solidify its power?
They certainly want to try that, but it turns out we live in a globalized marketplace, and over time it becomes very clear when relative economies are weak or strong as trade starts to play out. The story that's being tried to be told is much more difficult to actually perpetuate than people think. It's part of why Xi and others have tried to create what they call a circular economy to try to keep as much economic activity inside China as possible. It's just something that's simply not possible in the age of globalization. Whether it's China or the United States, trade is still one of the major things that drives economic development and discussion, and you simply can't hide from it. And if you do, your economy is much, much worse off.
All right, Ryan, just one final question here. We know that no regime lasts forever. You look in history, time and time again, the regimes fall. So I want you to imagine if the CCP were to, come to an end, what would be the factor that leads to that?
Well, so I think economics is one of the major ones that is a risk point for the CCP. One of the things that has been a consistent driver of their ability to stay in power is the ability to deliver real and consistent, although often exaggerated, economic growth and development for China. And so that risk point becomes a place where I think the CCP has had a real struggle, because China and the leadership of China still faces all the same pressures. There's simply a different institutional arrangement that make it harder for that feedback to get actually pushed through, but they're not exempt from it.
All right, well said here, Ryan Yong, AIER. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Staying on China here, in a dramatic change, Tesla cars are now on the Chinese regime's purchase list. Specifically, Tesla's best-selling Model Y was included in a list of electric and plug-in hybrid models that a local government in China can purchase as a service car. So this is according to state media on Thursday. And it was the first time, actually, Tesla's cars have been made eligible for official purchases in China. And this is a major shift for the communist country. Previously, Tesla's cars were banned from entering some state and military compounds in China. But restrictions were lifted following endorsement from China's top auto industry association, saying that Tesla's data collection was acceptable. All right, rising tensions between the EU and Beijing, and this comes after the bloc raising tariffs on imported Chinese EVs of up to 37%. And this will be the European Union's largest trade case yet. NTD's Sean Marshall has more information.
The European Union will impose tariffs on imports of electric vehicles made in China, the levies ranging from 17% up to 37%. The aim is to protect European production against Chinese unfair trade practices as part of the EU's trade defense policy. I asked money manager Vijay Morolia how this event might affect the EU or Chinese stock markets.
It's going to force the companies and the executives to either submit to the regulatory authorities or change the business plan, right? There's a big world out there and there's a lot of consumers. And so it's going to be like put up or shut up, right? Now, again, it's still a little bit too early.
Beijing has said it would take all necessary measures to safeguard its own interests. Whether the tariffs will stick around in the long term will depend on how talks turn out between the two sides. Morola's view on investing in the Chinese market right now is that it's more dangerous than it is rewarding.
The Chinese market has grown fivefold, let's say, over the last decade. And meanwhile, the returns that investors in that market have realized is something like a loss of 2/3 of their capital. It's a communist market. It's hard to trust real property rights because the Communist Party owns everything.
Chinese brands MG and NIO suggested on Thursday they might raise prices in Europe later this year. And Tesla said last month it planned to increase the prices of its Model 3. On Thursday, XPeng became the latest EV maker to consider setting up manufacturing in the EU region to avoid the tariffs. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Meanwhile, Germany says no to selling a Volkswagen unit to China and dealing a fresh blow to the already tense relationship between the two countries. Volkswagen has planned to sell a gas turbine business to a Chinese state-owned company. But a German government review raised national security concerns, particularly that the turbines could be used to power warships. So this is, of course, not the first time. In November 2022, Germany blocked the sale of one of its semiconductor factories to a Chinese-owned tech company, also citing security concerns. And Independence Day is here. It's a time for Americans to celebrate their freedom and spend time with family and friends. NTD's Daniel Monahan speaks with a Hall of Fame barbecue pitmaster for some tips on how to throw some magic together on the grill.
Delicious. You should try this.
Leanne Whippen has been a pitmaster for about 30 years. She has served barbecue to congressmen and senators, appeared on TLC's Barbecue Pitmasters, and bested Bobby Flay on Food Network's Throwdown with Bobby Flay. She says there's no need to make it fancy for the 4th. Many Americans love some good old-fashioned barbecue grub like burgers, hot dogs, and ribs.
So I like for people to be kind of independent in their choices, so I give them choices. And I'll put an array of different things they can put on top of their hamburgers, be it cheese or, sauteed mushrooms, so they could build their own burgers. And I also like to do, of course, barbecue smoked long cooks like brisket and pork.
The award-winning pitmaster shares a secret to keep the meat nice and juicy.
Another trick that I have is put apple juice into a spray bottle. And when you're cooking meats and they look dry, just spritz it with that, and that will caramelize with your spices and keep your meat more moist.
Whippen advises against skimping on meat quality.
When you're doing ribs, make sure you take that membrane, which is the skin on the back of the ribs off, because that allows your dry ribs to permeate the meat. For chicken, I recommend brining, so that really adds a lot of moisture to your bird, you might say.
One side dish Whippin loves to whip up is Mexican street corn.
So it's real simple. After you take it off the grill, you just slather it with some mayonnaise and you put Mexican cheese, cotija cheese if you don't have that, feta cheese, and some cilantro. And then you could take some Tequila spice or even some chili powder and sprinkle it on top. And you've taken your corn to the next level with not a lot of work.
The Hall of Fame barbecuer is definitely the right person to ask about side dishes. She won first place at the World Food Championships with her potato salad.
So potato salad is a very traditional side in barbecuing and on the 4th of July, but you can make it a little, like step it up a little bit. And I like to add a lot of bacon and hard cooked egg. And I think that really elevates it to the next level.
Whippin discusses her secret weapon when battling in the barbecue pit.
My pig powder, and this is a rub that my dad developed. It won Best Rub on the Planet, which is a very large award. A lot of the guys on the circuit use it in competition.
Her dad is barbecue legend Jim Trim Tab. The pig powder is a well-guarded family recipe and can even be used on other foods like French fries and baked beans. As you fire up your grill this July 4th, remember these tips from a barbecue master to make your celebration unforgettable. Happy Independence Day, Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
To celebrate 4th of July, we here at NTD are bringing you a special very close to our hearts. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao, along with Jan Ikelik, senior editor at the Epoch Times and host of American Thought Leaders, reflect on Independence Day, their personal journeys to America, and what America stands for. You can watch this special co-produced by NTD and the Epoch Times right here on NTD at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. It's also going to premiere on NTD's website at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Now, let's turn the tables a little bit.
Let's do it.
So these are questions that our audience really wanted to ask you.
So that's all the stories we have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have feedback for the episode, please feel free to let me know. You can email us at business@ntd.com or leave a comment online. I do read them, and as I always say, business matters. See you tomorrow.